Thank you very much. It's a great honour as a campaigner to be invited anywhere and be given a voice for me to try and influence you in your attitudes that you might have, or for me to try and influence you to go out there and be edge walkers too and create change in whatever area grabs your attention. Now, I've got to say before I start, there are a couple of things in life that have come back and bit me on the bum. And these are preconceptions that I've had. And one of those was my first day as a student nurse on a surgical placement. And the School of Nursing had told us, encourage independence. So I'd gone into a side room to help a lady with her hygiene needs. She was a young lady, very, very jaundiced, and she made absolutely no effort to wash herself. And I kind of came out of the side room after bed bathing her, and my thoughts were, gosh, what a lazy woman. And the next day when I went into work, because I was good, I went for my second day, that lady had died. And it really hit me how judgmental I'd been, judging a lady that was dying. And I kind of reflect on it even now and think, my goodness, I think that lady would have been in ICU. And, you know, care would have been a lot better. But it certainly taught me a lesson. And I think one of the other lessons that has been taught to me was by my own daughter regarding domestic abuse, because we thought our kids, they're clever, they're intelligent. She was a staff nurse at Blackpool A&E. And I used to go around kind of thinking in my own little dream world, my kids will never be affected by domestic abuse. It doesn't happen to people like us. And in reality, I couldn't have been more wrong about my preconceptions as to what domestic abuse was. My preconceptions, my narrow-minded vision as to who I thought it happened to, not that that made it right. My preconceptions thinking that a justice system was out there to protect victims. I've got to say, normally I speak with my husband. He's very diplomatic. I'm more a bit of a passionate kind of speaker. Sometimes my voice cracks a little bit. But we became edge walkers. It wasn't on our bucket list ever to do. But when Jane was living in fear after reporting Jonathan Vaz for domestic abuse, assaults, sexual assaults, rapes, and when he was given bail, she was the prisoner. She was the one that needed to keep safe. Whilst he was out there, able to stalk her, able to frighten her, able to kill her. So here we go. This is why we became edge walkers. I'm Penny Clough. I have an MBE. Sounds very grand, doesn't it? But I kind of say it should mean more bloody effort. I haven't told the Queen that. More bloody effort when it comes to what we understand about domestic abuse, what we actually do to support victims. I'm also a patron for SafeNet Refuges in Lancashire. We have 3 of the 11 refuges, but to be frank, every single one of them is important to me. And I'm an ambassador for Paladin, which is the National Stalking Advocacy Service. We were on the parliamentary committee that brought in 2 new stalking laws. But do you know what? A law is only ever any good if it's used. And frankly, they're not used enough. I'm a whinger, aren't I? So, like I said, MBE, more bloody effort, and I think that includes education. The way forward is to stop abuse happening. I didn't realise that the manipulation and control I was seeing from Jonathan Vaz to my daughter was part of domestic abuse. The fact that he was controlling her, isolating her. I thought domestic abuse was physical and sexual, but it's so much more than that. It's the emotional hurt that goes along with it, and also it has financial implications. So enlightenment to prevent would be great. The effort that we need to put in to support victims, to prevent them becoming greater victims, we really need to work on that, because unless we can get the message out there that you can report domestic abuse, that you can keep safe, that we can keep you safe, if we fail in that, and we are failing in every part of society, then we are failing the victims. We are further victimising the victims. And just going back to those preconceptions, and again, I've had this as a nurse, and I feel quite ashamed. Those moments where you think you get somebody through the door on ICU, half battered to death or whatever, and you think, why the hell didn't you get away? And the reality is, it's so hard to escape domestic abuse, with the underlying threats from the perpetrator or the ex-partner that he will get you, that he will get the kids, or what have you. And Jane, our daughter, is our motivation, and her motivation to come forward as a victim of domestic abuse was that she had a baby, and she wanted to keep that baby safe. Vaz attacked her in front of the baby, and that was the turning point for Jane to say, enough is enough, I need to get away so the baby still has a mum. So, we're edge walkers. We knew that Jane kept a journal. We knew that she was going to speak out about the fear that she had when Jonathan Vaz was out on bail, knowing that he would try and get to her. She couldn't speak because he murdered her. So in a way, we are her voice. And in the presentations that we give to police and the CPS or domestic abuse charities, we tend to use bits of a diary, her words, and they're really, really powerful. And as edge walkers, we are innovative in trying to create change, and we are driven to do it because we think if somebody had have done what we've done 10 years ago, perhaps our daughter would be alive. And also, it was that thing. We had to think outside the box. How on earth can we make an impact and try and create change and move things forward so we can better protect victims of abuse? Anybody drive here today? Put your hand up. Did anybody wear a seatbelt? Put your hand up. Why? You want to be... Anybody want to be safe? Yeah. All a victim of abuse wants, when they try and get away, is to be safe. The Eiffel Tower, I put that there because it represents to me that just over a year ago, terrible terrorism happened in Paris. People were murdered, people were harmed, people were frightened, people had to go through the wonderment of thinking, is it my relative who's been hurt? Am I going to survive tonight? And whilst I'm saying this is terrorism, what I'm also saying to you is that stalking and domestic abuse is terrorism. And those people who are affected by domestic abuse and stalking, they are going through the same thoughts. What's going to happen? Will I be alive tomorrow? How am I going to cope with this? How do I get back to work? Will I sleep tonight? And I've got to admit, 6 years down the line, there are still days when I can't do things. I am so hurt still by what happened to my daughter, the fact that it happened at all, the fact that it's still happening out there to so many others. There are days I can't do this kind of thing. And if I was still working, there were days I'd be ringing in sick. But of course, there are days when I'm absolutely full of vigour and I think, gosh, what can I do today to drive this campaign forward, to drive that campaign forward? And I do it. And so does my husband. And I think what is so important about being an edge walker are the valuable others, the people that come on board. And I was saying earlier that in our campaign we've written hundreds and hundreds of letters to very prominent people. We've had lots and lots of meetings with very prominent people. But it is the handful that actually care enough to come on board to support you that helps us succeed. So just kind of looking at the names there, Louise Casey, when Jane was murdered, she was the Victims Commissioner. Absolutely amazing woman. Louise came to see us at our home. We expected to have to go to London to see her, which was the normal kind of path of things. Louise Casey, absolutely amazing. And even now, she's still working, looking into the abuse that has happened in Sheffield, Rotherham, wherever in this country. And it's where we knew it was happening, and people didn't do enough to stop it. Vera Baird. My God, Vera Baird is a scary lady. She's a redhead. I don't know if that's a link at all. I don't know if anybody's done research. Vera Baird was the Solicitor General for the Labour Party. And when we were campaigning to have the bail law changed, she wrote us a reply saying, "What do you mean that you can't appeal a bail decision in the High Court?" So we told her what happened in Jane's case. Jane wasn't even allowed to be in court. She was represented by the Crown, the CPS. And when Jonathan Vaz was granted bail, we could not appeal it. But if he had been refused bail, he could appeal that decision. And we always had this concept in our brains that the law was supposed to be fair and just. So we've actually campaigned with Vera Baird, and she did the legal wording for us when she got back to us, which made her a star. And we got the law through. And it was a 10-minute rule bill. And we knew that when we were trying to get this into Parliament by our MP, Andrew Stevenson, who we didn't vote for, but he cared, we knew that we had a less than 1% chance of making it succeed. So with the support that we garnered on board, and we went to unions and what have you, and my husband is a railway man. They've got a very strong union. He went to the RMT and said, "Will you support us in this?" And their attitude was, it's a 10-minute rule bill, it's got less than a 1% chance of getting through. What is the point? And our argument back is that's exactly the point. That if we want it to get through, we need your support. And that is what's so important, support. I've got a poster here about Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer was the head of the Crown Prosecution Service. When Vaz pleaded guilty to the murder of our daughter, all the rape charges against him were laid on file. We'd never heard of this concept. But basically, they were called insignificant in open court, and we were furious that Jonathan Vaz was not a positive statistic, found guilty of rape, sending the message out that you do this, we will prosecute, we will get you. And Keir Starmer, as head of the CPS, he was out there and he was doing conferences and he was saying England had the lowest prosecution rate for rape in Europe. Only 5% of rapes reported ever got to court. And we're thinking, well, no wonder we've got the lowest prosecution rate if you're letting men off who rape and then murder the victim. So the way we hit back at Keir Starmer was to demonstrate outside his office in London. Group of nurses, we took all our banners, and we had this one done about Keir. Keir Starmer let Vaz off with rapes, I could turn in my grave. And what worried us as the parents of Jane was that if Vaz ever gets out, he's not on the sex offenders register. What protection would that give women? It would give them none. He would not be monitored. So Keir Starmer was very good. The first meeting we had with him, he actually had to leave. His wife was in labour. She had a little girl. But the second meeting we had with him, it gave us great power. He was now the dad to a daughter that he obviously loved. And we had a daughter that we loved. And we said, Keir, if your daughter was raped, would you want her to report them? If your daughter was then murdered, would you want that man to be let off with rape? Simply because murder is seen as the worst crime? And so Keir Starmer totally reversed Crown prosecution policy. And now the good thing is he's giving families choice. If sadly their loved one is murdered after rape, they will be given the choice, do they want that person prosecuted who did that? And I think that's so important. So here we are, outside Rose Court in London, Keir Starmer's office. He had his petition for the bail law. People were coming out of his office to sign out a petition. This amazing lady in the middle is Louise Casey. She was made a dame in the New Year's honours for the Queen's birthday. And I've got to say, I'm very proud of her. She's a person who is out there. She is a person who cares. And I'm sure that when a report comes out regarding sex abuse that's been happening and ignored, she will make things happen. You're a lot. And the lady with the red hair, Vera Baird, we thought our 10-minute rule bill to change the bail law was going to be talked out of time. And we thought, oh, good grief, we're going to have to go through all this again next year and represent it. We weren't going to give up. But it was about 10:30 at night. All the parliamentarians went out for half an hour break. And Vera, who was sat with us, said, don't give up hope. We're going to do a bit of political skullduggery. And Sadiq Khan, who's now the Mayor of London, he came back into the House, into chambers, and there were two things mentioned in the last half hour. And because they were mentioned, it automatically went to the House of Lords, and one of those was Clough and the bail amendment. So we knew that when we got it to the House of Lords, it basically succeeded. And this is Keir Starmer now. He's no longer the head of the CPS, he's actually a Labour MP, and he's campaigning for victims' rights. And you will hear all the time about the perpetrators, the prisoners, the bad people. They have got so many rights to help them, support them, protect them. But the victims have actually got very few, and he's out there campaigning for victims. So we've gone from actually thinking, God, Keir Starmer, what kind of a man are you that lets a man off with rapes, to actually really liking this man because he listens, he cares, he sees injustice, and he did something about it. He wrote a fantastic article in the Times, Why Jane Clough's Death Changed My Mind on Rape. And I must admit, I think when Jonathan Vaz gets out of prison, my husband and I will be dead. But we've got somebody on our side, Keir Starmer, and he'll be fighting to keep him in. So as sex workers, we're out there. Every time Jane's Law was mentioned in Parliament, we went down there. We took a group of nurses. Some of my colleagues, some of Jane's colleagues. And we protested. And we wore our Justice for Jane t-shirts, not knowing that you can't wear such things in Parliament. So we actually had to go into the loos and turn them inside out. But what the hell, when we came out again, we turned them the right way. So we took every opportunity to put pressure on the government to implement change. And we attended conferences and we gathered signatures. We used local media because there was a lot of media surrounding Jane's death. And we still use lots of media. I was on Look North on Monday night talking about stalking. A couple of weeks ago, I got about 100 words in The Sun talking about funding for refuges. Why on earth do we have to fight for it? And luckily we've just succeeded in Lancashire in getting them to provide funding for refuges. But then, within days, we knew that the housing cap benefit was possibly going to take that money straight away again. But luckily this week, Theresa May has released a statement saying refuges will be exempt. And most important, it's all very well having high-profile people to back us up. It was the public, the people at grassroots who make the difference, who are out there supporting us, who are out there saying what's wrong with the system, who are out there providing the support and care for domestic abuse victims. They help us and we help them. So for our achievements, we've got Jane's Law. It's very underused, but we think for every time it is used, we think that is a victim saved. That is a family not having to go through what we've gone through. We've altered CPS guidelines on rape. We've got Jane's card, and that was because we wanted to donate her tissues. I was involved in enucleation, removal of corneas, on intensive care, and I knew I had 3 days to get Jane's corneas, and I couldn't make it happen because her body was deemed as evidence. And we were furious. It annoys me still to think that because she was killed from ear to ear, that we couldn't donate corneas, the skin, the bone, the heart valves. But now it will happen in Lancashire, and the police carry around Jane's cards. So for deaths that happen within the community, including murders, the relatives will be consulted as to whether they want to donate. And we know that's had a tremendous impact. The Rosa Training Centre is on Merseyside, and they've got a special training room, and it's been named the Jane Clough Training Room. I feel very honoured that they're out there training people to support victims of domestic abuse. We've succeeded, like I said, in getting funding for Lancashire refuges. And what we're really working on is getting policies in the workplace to support domestic abuse victims. And why on earth would I want that? Well, to be honest, we saw how hard it was for Jane to get back to work as a victim of domestic abuse. Jonathan Vaz used to ring in sick after beating her, after raping her, and say that she was drunk. How on earth do you sort that out at your return to work interview? And this is all manipulation by the perpetrator. He also used to steal her shoes, lock her in the house, take her car keys, take her phone, so she couldn't get to work. And honestly, do people ring in and say they've been raped? I can't come into work today. I've been beaten. I can't come into work today. Or do you ring in and say you've got a stomachache? How hard is it for us to care enough about our own staff that work within the NHS? Because we just seem to put pressure on them. Oh, you're not at work again. Oh, you're not at work again. And you're going down the stages. And suddenly, your job is at risk. And this is victimising the victim. When it came to the bail laws being backed by the House of Lords, of course it was a great success. This is Jane's card that's used in Lancashire by police regarding organ donation. This is the RASA training room called the Jane Clough Training Centre. And what really gets me are the politicians, because frankly some of them are, I'm thinking of a four-letter word. They give it the spiel, but they don't give it the effort and care. So when it came to Prime Minister David Cameron backing the Jane Clough campaign, they kind of came and said, oh, what do you think? David Cameron's backing you. And said, well, David Cameron's backing us because he can't do anything else about it now. It's gone to the House of Lords. He said, but David Cameron could have been one of the first people to show that he was sincere about helping domestic abuse victims and have backed us from the start and helped this bill get through. Glad he's gone. And even though I've got an MBE, sometimes other things mean more than that. In fact, everything, well, no, don't say that, Pen. So I've got an award from a conference I did a few years ago now. I spoke for 5 minutes. Award for services to health and wellbeing. Supporting domestic abuse victims. It is a health issue. And I can say from being a patron of refuges that we turn 4 more people away because we have no places for them. I can say that the people who come to us with complex needs, and that is substance misuse, drugs, alcohol, mental health issues, we have got so few places. And we need to team up with the NHS because it is a health problem. They need to take their part of responsibility, and we need to start getting it right, where we're out there providing the support they need, so we are not turning people away back to the very situation that they came from. That horrifies me. Like I said, we're sometimes lucky enough as edge walkers to get a bit of publicity on television, and this all adds to the pressure on government. And just a few figures here. Is there anybody here who doesn't know somebody who's had cancer, or you might have cancer yourself? But how many of us would say that we know a victim of domestic abuse? 1 in 4 of us, and they're saying it's more likely to be 1 in 3, will be victims of domestic abuse at some stage in their lifetime. 35 incidents is the average number before a person reports to police. 104 women are murdered every year by their partners and ex-partners. And I thought it was quite interesting that a professional man, a solicitor, was murdered. Because again, it challenges our perceptions of who domestic abuse victims are. 1 in 6 men will be victims of domestic abuse. I've got to say, we are building a refuge purely to support men. There's too few of them. 200 women a year successfully commit suicide due to domestic abuse. And 1 in 2 threats to kill that are made in the workplace will be acted upon by the perpetrator. So if somebody in your workplace is threatening harm, you must take it further. 1 in 2 disabled people will be victims of domestic abuse. So who can be an edge walker? Who can be out there challenging the system, wanting answers, wanting change? Who can be a victim of domestic abuse? Anybody can. So sometimes in your life there might be something that happens that grabs you and you stand up and you think, I've got to do something. And I'm going to start, just saying a few little quotes here because I really like them. I think they're quite powerful. Arthur Ashe was an American tennis player. He was one of the first people to die from AIDS after a blood transfusion. And it's start where you are, use what you have, do what you can. And as an edge walker, I am doing what I can. I am using what I've got. I've started, but I don't think I can finish. Here's another one, Thomas Edison. Clever bloke, I believe. Our greatest weakness lies in giving up. And sometimes, you want to give up. The most certain way to succeed is always to try just one more time. And I've got to say, my husband and I, we've become quite stubborn. We push for answers. If they don't answer us, we push a little bit more. Albus Dumbledore, my hero. It is our choices that show us what we truly are, far more than our abilities. And after Jane's murder, the justice system expected us to go home and get over it. You don't get over it. We had a choice. Sit on our bums and do nothing. And believe me, that would have been fine, and that is okay for some people. Or be edge walkers. And that's what we are. Thank you.